Hi again. As Frixos said before, we are going to jump into quantitative methods for integrated planning. And my presentation focuses on the connectivity and proximity planning aspect. And to be honest, is like a methodological perspective of what we mean about connectivity and proximity. And the quantitative part could be the part of how we implement that. So our presentation would not be technical, because technicalities we will see them later, but it would be the way of thinking and the way of processing such data, and also the way to choose connectivity over proximity, or combine them and make our scenarios for the future. So first of all, we have to note and to connect all the previous presentations with ours right now. And what we really need to underline again is that these conventional approaches, they didn't consider all the dimensions, the different dimensions of planning. And I will try to present in this slot this kind of interdisciplinarity and integrated nature of planning, and to specify that into the accessibility of proximity and accessibility of connectivity. But before we embark into that, I should also mention once again what Ioanna said, which is really crucial when we talk about integrated planning. We surely need, and of course quantitative approaches, we surely need evidence-based approaches. Without them, we are, let's say, doomed to base our planning methods and our planning way of thinking and our planning rationale into only our experience, which is really important, but we should go beyond that, and we should advance our experiences with methods. So evidence-based is the key for quantitative methods in integrated planning. Otherwise, we will fall into traps. So to continue and to get more into our presentation, urban and transport dimensions, they play a pivotal role. We saw the principles and how we can link them. We can link them only with this integrated approach. And to be more precise, when we talk about integrated things, to combine participation, to combine methods and stuff like that, it's really simple. It may sound very vague sometimes, or very optimistic, but it's not. It's something very simple. For instance, we want to plan a city in a strategic level. We can see here this conceptual diagram, which is really helpful. We have to not only propose measures about mobility, we have to promote measures about mobility simultaneously with measures about activities and land uses. And this kind of the corridors, which is closely related to mobility, should be also connected to the polygon thing, which is mostly related to activities and land uses. So this kind of points or polygons, and this kind of lines, you will see them afterwards in the next presentation. It's really important to make the basis for an integrated planning approach. Focusing only on one of these two is really helpful, but it's the beginning, only the beginning. It's not the complete process. So when we think about integrated planning, quantitative approach, we need this kind of data to help us plan and to help us understand simultaneously, this is a keyword, planning procedures. So we will deal into one topic of integrated planning, because integrated planning could cover many more topics, and we think that very popular dilemma is the difference of connecting or to be in proximity with other things. So we have this connexus or proximus, which is like the difference of connecting things, or the way of connecting things, or the approach of building new land uses and new activities that make distances much more reduced, and things are closer to each other. So this is a basic dilemma when we talk about integrated planning, because both of them require the other one. It's not the approach that we connect things without thinking of where they are, or we just create new land uses without thinking of their connection. So this kind of dilemma is not so an absolute one. We have somehow, it's not 0 or 1. It's not a binary dilemma. It's like a binary at first, but we have to say that combining the solutions could be also something that we can do. And let's dive into each approach, and then we will see about their combination. First one is connectivity planning. We will see also these kind of plannings tomorrow into the course of how we plan strategically a city. So today we will only see the methodological part, not any practical. Tomorrow is the practical one. So connectivity is how we connect land uses. It's simple one, and simplicity offers greater understanding and much more room for thinking and building upon that. So connectivity is about connecting, and we can see here some different scenarios of connecting land uses with each other. For example, hub and spoke, we have one neighborhood or one center or one public transport station to rule them, or let's say to connect all the others to that one. Or we can see the point to point, which entails all the neighborhoods that are connected together. On the other hand, we have proximity planning, which is we plan land uses or activities, or give way for new activities, or we redistribute the existing ones. This is the most difficult part of the equation, but it could be implemented in somehow. But the planning of new land uses is the most common one. So we can see here these conceptual examples that we have bigger distances when we talk about jobs and workplaces, residential areas, and entertainment. But proximity planning builds upon bringing all these different kinds of activities together. And this is also meant by spatially bringing all this together. So we can have, for instance, a neighborhood that today is only residential, and gradually with formal planning initiatives, or with the proper planning approaches, we can have there bars, we can have restaurants, or not only entertainment things, but we can have buildings that host public services, or workplaces, offices, and stuff like that, along with the residential uses. So we have to rethink, when we talk about proximity, we have to rethink the how to say that we have to rethink the centralities of the city, and the centralities are not something which is really separate from one another, but these centralities create a compact polycentric city. This pertains to a high level and a higher scale approach. But when we talk about neighborhoods and proximity, well, X minute neighborhood or X minute city, 15-minute city, if we want to declare one specific time threshold, they are really helpful for understanding the proximity planning context. So we can see here community center, health centers, and public health is really important. We mentioned that before. We can see small businesses, food markets, and according to literature, food markets are a really essential place that we should approach into less than 10 minutes. So we have food markets, we have parks, facilities for different groups, for children, for elderly, and also other kinds of facilities like schools or supermarkets and athletic ones. So proximity is about new land uses that emerge, and then we reduce distances. And on the contrary, to remind you, connectivity relates to connecting these land uses, but we do not focus on new ones, but we can connect new ones, and only the new ones. We can connect the new ones, but we can also connect existing ones. And connectivity relies on an efficient transport network. And if we want to be sustainable, we should rely on public transport network, a sustainable network, a cycling network. So this is very important. We have connectivity and proximity. And another key aspect of proximity is about decentralizing things. So here we can see these two different approaches. We have connectivity on the right, so it's more centralized, and we do not care about somehow diving into the local scale. It's like we have a hierarchy into serving different kinds of places, but on the contrary, in the decentralizing approach, which is much closer to the 15 minutes or X minutes city or neighborhood, is about decentralizing services or classification of a road network and stuff like that, in order to promote this Proximus kind of thing, and to give the opportunity of doing more things into closer distances and to combine different things together. So this is an important note about proximity and connectivity. The one in connectivity we connect, and in proximity we create new things closer to each other if we have the chance. So an example of connectivity is street classification. And what we mean by that is that we can reorder roads and their role in order to connect easily places, centralities, neighborhoods together. And street classification is about rethinking of the sustainable one, is about rethinking street space. And street space is not only about motorized traffic movements, and this adheres to the 12 principles that we saw before. And now street classification and the sustainable one is about making corridors that accommodate public transport, cycling networks, and pedestrian routes. So street classification is an example of connectivity, but it could be, under some circumstances, used for proximity, because we can, through the space, we can delineate parts of our cities that could host new land uses and new centralities. So, and this is a very, very important example of connectivity and proximity planning together. We saw superblocks and the successful example that they are from Dionysia in a very detailed way, and it's an integrated way of thinking because we can engage people because it's their neighborhood, and superblocks mainly started from Barcelona into neighborhoods, and they tried to protect these neighborhoods from through traffic, and they comprise an integrated planning tool because we should think of the land usage, we should think of people, and we should think of the connectivity matters like the street network. And what we do by Superblock, we try to avoid the unnecessary traffic through the neighborhood and give space back to people, and accommodate more space for greening and more space for non-motorized movement, and of course to ensure accessibility conditions for everyone. So Superblock is a really nice example if we want to do integrated planning. And to conclude, I left this slide intentionally at the end because we talk about these two kinds of accessibility and proximity. You can see that here we have spatial proximity, which is the land use system and the proximity thing that we mentioned before, but we also have the transport system, which is the physical mobility and the connectivity. But they're not the only ones that we should take into account. When we talk about integrated accessibility planning, something new, and not brand new, but new after the internet became more popular, is digital connectivity. So when we think about this kind of planning, we should also embark into a triple access framework that relies also into digital connectivity, because cities fortunately or unfortunately are realizing the third dimension of planning, which is the digital connectivity, and that may affect and had already affected, and we saw that during COVID, our cities and how we behave and how we interact with people. And so this triple access framework would be a really fundamental methodological source of integrated planning. And of course, it would give us a third pathway into the dilemma between physical mobility, as known as connectivity, and spatial proximity, as known as proximity. So with that, we can build new scenarios. We can build scenarios of business as usual or new normalities with 15-minute cities, and also scenarios that are not so fortunate. And these kinds of integrated planning is really important when we do really aspire to think our cities differently. And it could lead very, very efficiently to scenario planning. That would be all. And thank you so much. And I hope I was on time. And if you have any question, feel free to ask me.
Thank you. Okay, hello again. I will take it from Stefanos and continue and also link back to what we were discussing before in the theoretical framework. When I was discussing the need for evidence-based design and practice and the role of spatial analysis within it. So because when we talk about quantitative methods and analytical methods, the idea is to know how we can use them within an urban design or an architectural design process. So like we said, the spatial analysis is mostly useful not only in the beginning, in the initial phases of a design project, where The problems are defined, the site is analyzed to identify problems and resources, challenges in relation to the design aims, but also during the design iteration, during the formulation of design strategies and the main design choices, to help assist on scenario testing, on testing and evaluating, assessing, comparing different alternatives, design alternatives within the design team to improve and scrutinize their design drafts in order to arrive to the best possible design outcome in relation, of course, to the project aims and objectives. Now, we need to, Stefanos introduced an approach that is very related to that, and then I want to talk about the centrality and accessibility, but first, it's important to understand why we need to be clear about the methodological background when we use analytical tools, spatial analysis, quantitative analysis, because there are different models, there are different analytical methods. So it's very important to be clear on what we use, what we measure, what we quantify, because how we design, how we act upon the world, the built environment, depends on what we know about the world, and what we know depends on how we describe and model the world, the built environment. So how we represent, how we model, how we analyze are key in this process. So our approach as a spatial morphology group at Chalmers University and as Urban Calculator is to focus on the spatial properties, to measure and quantify spatial properties of cities that have been proven crucial for urban processes of social, economic, and ecologic nature. And we are basically talking about the fundamental elements of urban form, which is street network centrality. And there we draw methods from space syntax theory and methodology. We talk about built density, and there we draw from the space matrix method. And we also talk about accessibility to attractions and services. And there we draw from the place syntax methodology. And this we quantify and we measure this separately, but also in combination. And in different scales, local city scale, regional scales, and local scales. And these are basically the main elements of a designer, an urban designer, let's say, has to, in his power in terms of physical entities that we can design, we can shape. Now, the important thing to understand is that these three are connected, they are not separate. And this has been brought forward within space syntax by the theory of natural movement that has that what this argues, and actually this has been. Dionysia, can you please mute?
Oh, sorry, excuse me.
So what this theory argues, and it has been proven through numerous empirical studies, is that the street centrality, the street configuration, the street layout in a city shapes is the generator of movement flows and predominantly pedestrian flows. And these pedestrian flows, these movement flows, create the conditions for also attracting land uses and densities in the city. These new densities, attractions, land uses can attract even more people in these locations in a kind of a multiplier effect. So all these three components, street configuration, attraction, density, and land use, these are very much related, intertwined, primarily because of the pedestrian movement that they are related to. So street configuration, the centrality and the connectivity bring pedestrians, so to say, movement flows. These pedestrians, these movement flows attract uses that they in turn bring even more pedestrians in this multiplier effect. And we see, for example, an example from Stockholm, where for the lunchtime, so it was a 2-hour time range where the researchers counted pedestrians on 3 different streets in the center of Stockholm. And you see that on this thick red line here, which is a street that is very connected, very central. Almost 8,000 people were recorded passing through, where on a side street with this thinner red line with medium centrality, around 800 people were recorded at the same time frame. And then on a smaller side street with very low centrality, almost a dead end, 2 people were counted. So you see that these streets were very close in terms of metric distance, but so much different in terms of their centrality, their connectivity in the network. And that made it so that one street had almost 8,000 people at the same time. A street very close by had 2 people. So this is the power of the street configuration, basically. And then from these other effects, broader effects, we have in the cities walkability, livability, segregation, health and well-being, diversity, social integration, and so on and so forth that are related to this triangle. We place a lot of emphasis in the street network because not only it's a driver, like we said, of all these processes, but also because it's quite a stable layer of urban form. We can change easily land uses, building uses, even buildings we can replace, but the streets and the street configuration, the street layout, this is harder to change. So we need to be informed when we design. We need to be sure as we can when we design a street network. So I will say a few words about these 3 properties. I will start with street network centrality. How we measure this is we have 2 main measures of street network centrality. One is called angular between centrality, and there we see which location, which street is part of the most transit trips, which streets mediate movements and trips, shorter and long trips in the city. And the other one is called angular closeness centrality or angular integration. And this is basically how accessible its location is, its street is, what is the distance of its street to all other streets. One thing that is important from this methodological approach is that when we say distance, we talk about angular distance and not only metric distance. And that means that the shortest path from A to B is the straightest, because this is a kind of based on a more pedestrian-oriented modeling approach. And because pedestrians do not choose how to walk based on metric distance alone, but actually based on perceived distance, how easy it is, how perceptually easy it is to go from A to B, and we tend to choose the straightest routes, the straightest and longest routes to navigate and to walk in the city. So these are the 2 results. This is the case of Gothenburg in Sweden. We see angular integration, close centrality on the left, between centrality on the right. We see that we get different information from these 2 measures. One highlights centers, central areas, clusters of centrality. And we know that the more central, the more integrated an area is, the more mixed uses it attracts, the most people, higher densities, and so on. On the other hand, and then you see them, these areas in red, we see city centers, we see local centers, neighborhood centers, and so on. And then with blue and green, with low centrality, you see areas that are more segregated, suburban areas that are more disconnected, and so on. On the other hand, with between centrality, we see paths, we see centrality paths, so to say. We see a foreground network with the darker, thicker lines, we see the main structure of movement in the city. And then in the lighter gray, we see the background network of movement. Like I said, this is a pedestrian-oriented network modeling and analysis. Looking at street, it's a street-based network. The street is the key. The street is the node in the network analysis. It is different than kind of the transport-oriented modeling or the traffic engineering modeling, which is an origin-destination modeling and analysis, where the street is just a way to go from A to B. In the modeling we use, in the methodological framework we use, the street is the node of the network analysis, is the important element, and the distance is the kind of the perceived angular distance. We work with, we place a lot of emphasis in the non-motorized network, that is the network accessible to pedestrians, and the general network of the city, that exclude, for example, high-speed tunnels or flyovers or motorways and so on. But also we can use the same methodology to analyze the motorized network and model in a way the potential for traffic flows. Whereas in the non-motorized network, we model the centrality in relation to pedestrian flows. We do this analysis in different scales, from local scales to regional scales. You see on the left, for instance, the Gothenburg motorized network analyzed for the regional scale in 30 kilometers. And there you see that the most central roads, of course, that pop up are the highways. So we see the highway structure. If in the middle, we see a kind of a city scale analysis, and there we see the streets that are very important for the city scale movements, local and meso scale trips in the city. We see the main urban streets in Gothenburg that are used for shorter and longer trips. And then in 2 kilometers, we can see the local paths that connect neighborhoods, important within neighborhoods, only for shorter trips within the local scale, but are not important in the regional scale. What is interesting to see that in the 2 kilometers, for example, the highways disappear, become gray, have a very low centrality, of course, because the highways are not connected in the local scales with the local scale street network, with the neighborhoods in the local scales. Again, the integration we can, of course, again, analyze in different scales to look at not only the city centers, but also the neighborhood centers, areas that are important in the local context. I will move to build density to give some principles of the methodological background there. Sorry, I will move to urban accessibility, which is the third one, accessibility to attractions and services, and then we draw from the place syntax methodology. Here. And this is in relation to the 50-minute concept. We heard about this previously. The idea that everyone living in a city should have access to essential urban services within a 50-minute walk or bike. So urban accessibility is actually the ease of reaching destinations, activities, or other people, which is the potential for interaction. It is a conceptual model that works a lot with this measure. We see, for instance, again, the example of Gothenburg in Sweden, where we measured the proximity to healthcare centers. And then you see in dark orange residential addresses that have a healthcare center. This is primary health within 400 meters walking distance. But then you see also some areas, some suburbs, the gray areas that have a primary health that is further than 1 kilometer and 600 meters, almost to 15 kilometers. So basically inaccessible on foot. And this is a big problem. And then we start to talk about spatial inequalities in the city, since in these areas that have a very low proximity to primary health care centers are actually very densely populated. So if we combine an analysis of proximity to healthcare centers with an analysis of residential population density, we start to see the problems and I diagnose and highlight problems of spatial inequalities in the city. So you have a lot of people living in an area that do not have access to primary healthcare centers. This is an example of how accessibility analysis is used. And then again, we have two different measures. One is called attraction distance or proximity, and is a distance from an origin to the nearest destination or attraction of a certain kind. And then we have attraction reach, which is the total amount of attractions that can be reached within a certain distance from the origin. To make it more simple, here we see, for instance, on the left, attraction distance to schools. So which streets going from dark to light, which streets have a school within 500 meters walking distance, which streets have a school within a kilometer walking distance, which streets have a school within 3 kilometers walking distance. So you see the areas that are closer, the streets that are closer to schools. But on the right, we do not only see how far is it to the nearest school, we also see how many schools are reached from each street. And then going from light yellow to purple, we see that some streets do not only have access to one school, but actually in a 500 meters walking distance, they have access to more than 10 schools. That means that they can reach different schools because they can reach many schools and they can reach different schools. The more we reach, the highest the probability that these things are different, which is very important to also see. So not only one school, many schools. That means you can reach a primary school, you can reach a kindergarten, you can reach a high school, you can reach so you have different possibilities, different opportunities. The importance, we focus again on walking accessibility. This is a reason why. You see, for instance, again, an example from Gothenburg, where I have encircled this with this orange circle, where we see the river in dark blue. And then we see on one side of the river, you have streets that have access to water, direct access to the river in 500-meter walking distance or less. And then on the other side of the river, you have streets that are further away even than 1 kilometer from the river, although the river is just right by them on the side. So in straight line distance, these are equally close. These areas are equally close to the river, but actually in walking distance, the one side of the river is further away from water because there are no streets. The streets that are there are unwalkable. We lack street connectivity and so on. So the water is there, but one cannot reach it. I will finish with built density. And there we draw from the space matrix methodology. And the different thing here, the new thing, so to say, is that traditionally density has been calculated as in the upper map. This is a map of central Stockholm, and their density has been calculated on the block level or plot level, meaning how built up a block or a plot a property is, how big the footprint is in relation to the plot, how big the gross floor area is in relation to the plot. What is the methodology that we use brings forward is what is called accessible density. And this you see on the bottom side of the picture, because it's not enough to know, I mean, the upper picture tells us something about the block, how dense a block is, but it does not tell us much about how dense the city center of Stockholm is, while the lower bottom gives us this information, and this is what we need to know when we work with an urban redevelopment project, for example. And there you see that indeed the red parts of the city are the denser one in terms of gross floor area, in terms of footprint, coverage, and so on. And the different thing in terms of the methodology is that instead of, again, calculating, for example, gross floor area on the block level, for each block individually, what we measure is how accessible density, so from each building or from each street, how much gross floor area, how much coverage do we find if, for example, we walk 500 meters in all directions. So it's a kind of a density in a floating boundary. So you see here, for example, with what is the density that is around a street in a very small scale, and then in a kind of a mesoscale, and so on. So the accessible density, we could say it's something closer to perceived density, that we perceive, the density we perceive when we move through the city. So the first one, density on the block, is important when regulating density in plans, zoning plans, for example. But if we want to describe and understand urban life, the latter is better. So how much density when do we perceive when we move around the city? And you see that we can have, for example, in this example, a block can have high density, high plot density, but low accessible density. So the individual plot or block is highly dense, but actually is in an area with low accessible density. And on the other hand, we can have low plot density here on the upper corner on the same block, but also high accessible density, because this plot in itself has low density, has a small building, for example, but it is within a highly dense urban area. And this is the information we need. And I conclude here. Thank you. And later on, we will talk about the tools we use.
Thank you very much, Jana. Sorry for the delay, just changing computer here. So we move on to the two presentations on qualitative methods. So I'm Phrixos, for those who don't know me. My presentation will be on qualitative methods for integrated spatial planning, and we will explore how methods like interviews, observations, and participatory techniques can help us understand urban life and how they can inform inclusive, responsive planning strategies. There are many connections with things we have already heard and things that we will talk about later as well. So kind of some key notions and concepts. Just to reiterate, by integrated spatial planning, we mean a kind of strategic and holistic approach to planning that considers social, economic, environmental, and governance factors across different sectors and fields. So the previous two presentations discussed quantitative methods, which provide measurable and data-driven insights in order to inform design decisions, to validate hypotheses, or to predict certain outcomes. As with all methods, quantitative methods have their strengths and their limits, and qualitative methods in a way complement them. So quantitative methods are very strong when it comes to scalable data that tends to be objective. However, they can miss contextual nuances or users' perspectives. So this is where qualitative methods come in. because qualitative methods allow us to capture the human experience. So this means things like perception, culture, social practices that can't fully be represented by hard data. So in integrated planning, this is a very important thing. These methods are essential because they highlight lived realities and make planning more context sensitive and inclusive. As mentioned, it's not an either or question. So qualitative methods don't replace quantitative methods, but they complement them. So qualitative methods, as mentioned, they give us insight into the human factor, into user needs, in order to inform design decisions or even adjustments made after a project is completed. While quantitative methods are very useful at the meso and macro scales, as we saw from the previous presentation, the scale of the city is particularly present. Qualitative methods instead come more at the micro and the meso scale, as it would also be hard to process this kind of data at the macro scale. So here is a quick overview of some key qualitative methods. We have interviews and focus groups, which the purpose is to capture the needs of stakeholders and their preferences. And an example of use of these methods is when assessing occupant needs in the design stage of a project. Another qualitative method is ethnographic observations. Their purpose is to study how people behave and interact in the built environment. So an example is Jan Gehl's soft data approach, observing Copenhagen's public life in order to inform pedestrian zones. We have methods of participatory design, which will be discussed in more detail later on, which engage users directly in the design process. And then a kind of an offshoot of participatory design, they have a strong overlap, are post-occupancy evaluations, which evaluate the lived experience of a space after its completion. So this could be to adjust the layouts in an office building after it has been completed, for example. So after this overview, we will zoom in to some key methods, and then we will look at some examples. So the first kind of area we will zoom into are ethnographic observations. So ethnographic methods help us observe real-world behavior in its context. They are powerful because they reveal habits, conflicts, and needs that do not emerge from surveys or modeling alone. Ethnographic observations usually are technically easy to perform with simple tools and software. However, they often require a lot of time and effort to complete. As mentioned, they complement quantitative data with contextual richness, and they capture social interactions in real time. So some examples include behavioral mapping, which means to track movements and activities in a space over time. The outputs of this process could include annotated maps or even time-lapse photography. Another method is shadowing. So when you follow users in order to document their experience, the outputs for this could be notes or photographs, depending on what is appropriate for the situation. Or there can be diary studies where users self-report their experiences. And for this, the outputs can have different media. So as appropriate, this could be in text form, audio form, photography, or a combination. So moving on to interviews, which is a method very commonly used. The two forms of interviews that are most commonly used are structured and semi-structured interviews. So structured interviews are with closed-ended questions. For example, rating something on the Likert scale. I disagree strongly, I disagree, I'm neutral, I agree, or I agree strongly with a statement included in a survey, for example. Structured interviews follow a script, or they consist of a questionnaire, and they provide statistical data which is easy to analyze. Semi-structured interviews, on the other hand, are guided by core questions, but allow for follow-ups and conversation. They balance standardization with depth, and they adapt based on the responses to the questions. And they are used to identify themes and patterns. So commonly, we use a combination of structured and semi-structured questions, and this gives us some standardized responses, but also gives us a why to the other answers. Just to mention that there are also unstructured interviews, which are much more open-ended and conversational, but these are more commonly used to record oral histories. Finally, the third method we will look at are focus groups and workshops. So focus groups, the focus groups and workshops have similarities, they also have differences. So they both consist of gathering people together and having a kind of semi-guided conversation. So focus groups focus on gathering insights, opinions, experiences from stakeholders and users, and they are used to understand perceptions rather than to offer solutions. Workshops, on the other hand, they are more action-oriented. They co-create and develop ideas and make collaborative decisions, and the focus really is to produce outputs or actionable design insights. Sometimes they are combined. For example, this could be through a city walk that ends in a design workshop where there is a guided conversation throughout. So these methods, they offer both deep insights and practical outcomes, and they help us to ground design in both lived experience as well as collaborative agency. Moving on to some examples, and I think the superblocks are coming up again and again because they are quite a useful and interesting example to discuss integrated planning approaches. So for Barcelona superblocks, qualitative methods were used in the project in multiple phases. So in the beginning, there were focus groups with elderly residents as well as transect walks, so guided walks with conversation happening in parallel with families. And these revealed various concerns about comfort, shade, and safety. And participatory mapping allowed people to mark areas of importance, and there were also workshops where people could bring photographs and discuss according to these maps and photographs. So these insights help to shape more inclusive redesigns of the blocks, and it's important to note that qualitative methods were also used during the design process, but also afterwards in order to assess how successful individual iterations of the superblock project were. Another example is the Medellin metro cable system, where Medellin had an issue of the hillside neighborhoods being disconnected from the city core due to the steep terrain and informal street networks. Through a series of interviews and workshops, the residents explained how their daily commutes often involved hours of walking and high risk walking through streets. The planners used these inputs in order to co-design the metro cable, which is a cable car system integrated into the public transport network. In this redesign, the stations were placed near key desire lines, and and interventions extended beyond the station. So this included things like rebuilding or building new stairs, adding lighting, and also improving public spaces adjacent to the stations. This project showed how qualitative methods can have impacts on both an infrastructural and a social level, particularly in addressing spatial inequalities. So I will end here with some resources. As mentioned, these will become available. There are some books, one by Jan Gehl, Life Between Buildings, and a kind of set of tools developed by the Gehl Institute on for researchers to be able to conduct qualitative research in cities. There is a book on doing visual ethnography, a toolbox from UN Habitat on urban planning, which is a very comprehensive kind of guide available publicly, and then 2 academic articles looking at qualitative analysis and urban planning research and qualitative approaches to the city. I will finish here. I pass the floor to Dionysia for the second part of the qualitative methods, focusing on participatory methods.
Okay, can you see the presentation? Great. So hi again, everyone. Now I think Phrixos gave me the floor after presenting a very critical aspect of participatory methods as well, which is the qualitative aspect, because participatory methods are coming into the planning reality to provide, let's say, the experiences and the output that it's impossible to know without integrating people and stakeholders in the process. In my presentation, we will focus mostly on how a participatory exercise is structured to understand how it is built and how a planner should prepare this process from the very beginning. And then I will focus mostly on how we can divide the aspect of methods and tools, because there are a lot of cases where these 2 aspects, even for us, it's difficult to divide them. And in the next part, we will focus on the tools and some specific aspects on how physical and digital tools are now part of our work as well. So, a participatory planning method requires a planning process from the very beginning. It's divided in 3 phases. First of all, we start with the preliminary stage, where we should define what is the specific objective of this participatory exercise. For example, we need, if we have a public space, that it's we have identified first of all the challenges, and we understand, we map the area, and we need to integrate stakeholders in order to understand their needs, how they use the space. So we need somehow a map where they could identify these challenges, and maybe the next step will be a co-design process. So the objective of this exercise is twofold. In the first part, we should understand their need, how they interact with the space, and in the second part, we need to map the vision that they have and how they imagine this urban space to be transformed in the future. So if we have this in mind, it's easier to go to the next step and elaborate more on who we want to invite in this process. Who are these stakeholders that are affected and affect the decision on what is the outcome of this process. In this example, for example, we need maybe the entrepreneurs that are active around the square. We need the residents, we need the local authorities, and we need maybe associations or active groups that maybe act also as representative of more general groups. We need children, we need all the stakeholders that may are active users of this space. Then we need to inform these groups and start discussing with them and make them understand the process. It is necessary for them to understand that it's not just random dialogue, but it's a process where they will come in order to express their experience. So if you provide some information beforehand, they will be able also to be prepared and understand the whole process. And this will save a lot of time eventually. Then we set the agenda and find the right space. It's important to know the timing, understand how much time we need for mapping, how much time we need for visioning, and set a very detailed program on the methods and tools and everything that we may need in order to make sure that our participatory project is set in a detailed way. Then, after having set everything of that, it's time to choose which method and participatory tools we could choose. As we will see also in the next slides, we have a wide range of different methods, as already Phrixos mentioned about, for example, workshops or focus groups. But in each case, each of the tools and methods are beneficial in a different way. So we need to have also a brainstorming session as a team in order to understand what fits better to our goal. Then everything is set, and we go to the implementation phase, where as facilitators of this process, we need to be able to understand the dynamics of our group, to foster the dialogue, not to intervene, not to let's say, guide the dialogue, but just to be there to support the group, keep timing and track of the whole process, and also to let's say empower, especially those that are not very able in public speaking or in speaking in group settings, to be able to express also their thoughts and be more active in this part of the discussion. Then we need to be able to synthesize this during the discussion and make sure that at each step of the workshop or the process, we have some key aspects that are revealing and may feed the next steps. Then we need to be transparent and define the next steps and and inform everyone about how this data will be used, and if they're going to, for example, maybe in this case of the public square, maybe this data will feed our urban planning, our urban plans, and also this will be submitted to the municipality and so on. So it's important for them to know the process. Finally, of course, we document all the process, and it's important to share with the participants the results in order to see how their sayings and everything were evaluated. And of course, ask them for feedback also for us, because it is important to know what were the weak, for example, parts or the strong parts of the participatory process that help us improve the next steps in the future. But how we choose the method that we are going to use. This is always a tricky, let's say, question somehow, because each target group is different, each scope is different, and it's important to understand that we need to be adjustable on the needs and the dynamics of our team. So some critical aspects that we need to have into account when choosing a participatory method, it's, for example, first, why we need their involvement. For example, in this kind of, in the example that I used about the public space, if we need in the first step to map their interaction with the space, we need mapping. So a method that is used in this example is collective mapping, for example. So in this way, we make sure that we have also a visual way on how we present their experiences on map. Then we have the nature and the scope of the issue. So if, for example, it's a topic related with policy making or for gathering scientific knowledge, and our group is a group of academics and policymakers, then we may use a more formal setting like a focus group or a public discussion. The participants, who is affected, interested, or can contribute to the solutions. For example, here, if we have children, of course, this target group affects a lot the method that we're going to choose, because we need to choose something that is more creative or more interactive, and something that they will keep their interest more, because, for example, if the workshop lasts for 2 hours, then we need something that will make sure that it keeps the children active on this time. Of course, it's the available time. It's different if we have 1 hour, 2 hours a week or a month to do a participatory workshop. So in this way, our selection will be different. And finally, and of course, the budget. If we have budget limitations, of course, the materials that we are going to use, the space that we are going to choose, and also how we can distribute the different choices that we have also is different. But now let's see and focus a little bit more. What is this different about participatory methods and the tools? When we talk about methods, we are talking about the approaches or the strategies in general used on how to integrate stakeholders in the decision-making and planning process. It's, in other words, how the participation happens. The tools are represents the specific instruments or techniques within participatory methods. What exactly is the resources that we will use in order to, let's say, make the methods happen? I have some examples included in the next slide, so we can see more clear this division. As we said also in the previous presentation, we have different degrees of involvement, and of course, this is also reflected in the methods and tools that we can use in order to ensure this different kind of levels. For example, if we just want to consult the public of a decision that was already made and we need some feedback on that, we will use some presentation and dissemination material. And this is maybe enough for this kind of level of participation. But when we need to empower or and collaborate with the stakeholders in order to affect more and increase the level of participation, then we have methods like mapping of ideas, building conversations, and also co-creation of solutions, and so on. Now, let's see some of the participatory methods. What are the tools that is used can be used in order to make them happen, and some strengths and limitations, because of course none method can be applied in all situations, and of course some of them have a lot of limitations, especially when it comes to the target groups that can be involved. First of all, we start with public meetings, which is, let's say, something that we are all aware of, but in most of the cases it's not considered a participatory method. It's the tools. So the method is that we gather a big, in most of the cases, audience, and we do, let's say, a discussion. We have a discussion and we gather feedback. So this is the setting. So this is the method. The tools that are used in this way are the presentations and following a Q&A session, and it can be a town hall meeting or a round table, depending on how we want to build this agenda. The strengths of this method are, first of all, it is easy. We don't need a very specific methodology and step-by-step guidance to the participants to follow up. So we can have a big range of stakeholders and group to follow this procedure, and also provides an opportunity to rely information and gather feedback of a very large group. At the same time, this can be also a limitation, because in this way we cannot track a lot what is this, what type of stakeholders are included in the audience, if we are inclusive, if we have a significant representation, and so on. Then, when we talk about focus groups, this is the method, because in this way we have a smaller group of stakeholders, mostly representing a wide range of disciplines and people that have a significant level of expertise on the topic of discussion. The tools that can be used can be a face-to-face discussion, and or sometimes can be also a virtual setting in a Zoom meeting, and so on. The strength of these methods is that we can explore the different perspective of the same group on a common issue, because in most of the cases in this method we have a set of questions, the same questions, with a time setting, let's say 3 minutes for each representative, and everyone answers the same question from their own perspective. So in this way, we can understand the different dimensions of an issue of concern. The limitation is that in most of the cases, it's not effective for providing information to the public. It's used mostly when we have a group of experts. Now, we have the community mapping, which is, let's say, the collective way of mapping the needs, the strengths, the expectations, the limitations, and everything that can have a spatial dimension. The tools that are used is public roundtables, where we can gather a group of stakeholders around the map and have round discussions. And during the discussions, we note some aspects on the map, but also the last year, a significant dimension is also the digital aspect of these tools, but I will not tell a lot of things about that right now, because a specific mention on the digital tools are included in the next part of the presentation. The strengths of this is that it's in a fun way. It enables citizens to map the social, ecological, economic aspects of their community. It's a useful way to initiating dialogue, especially when it comes to planning, because in most of the cases we need to understand how their interaction with the space. And it's a method to document certain aspects of location services within a community, neighborhood, or municipality, so we can work in different levels. Of course, it's a process that it's time consuming. We need time. For example, in the first 20 minutes maybe of this workshop, the people will try to navigate themselves over the map. Here is this, here is that. So we need a time for orientation in this way. But at the same time, it is really critical when it comes to spatial planning. And of course, it is an expensive process because we need high analysis maps and printed and a lot of materials that can support this process. Now, another method is visioning. In this way, we say that the target of this process is to understand how the neighborhood, for example, visualizes the future setting of a square and an urban space. And the tools that we can use is brainstorming, for example, and also some graphic tools that are used, and with different questions we can summarize somehow at the end how this visioning is built. In most of the cases for this exercise, brainstorming with specific questioning is used. This brings citizen stakeholders together because they try to imagine a common future and they have to discuss in order to, for example, create a common sentence that summarizes all the aspects that they want to agree. So in this way, we have a bigger level of interaction and also a consensus that need to be reached. But it also requires long-term commitment because maybe this kind of discussion takes a lot of time in order to reach the consensus, and it may be challenging depending on the issue of discussion each time. Now, when we talk about workshop, because when we talk about participatory planning, workshops are, I think, the most common method used. We are talking about gathering a group of people in order to work on a set of different questions, which include, of course, workshops, because it's a more general, let's say, method. It can be related with also the others like collective mapping and focus group. So it can be, let's say, more of a mixed methods approach. And the tools that are used is the physical workshops. We set a table with different boards and questions and everyone works on that, or a remote setting with different platforms like Mentimeter, Slido, and so on. The strength here is that it helps us translate some discussions to, let's say, have a process where we start with some questions and then this can lead to an action plan. And it's a really attractive setting in order for different groups to discuss and interact. Here, it's to attend sometimes because it structures and have steps and timing that need to be followed. It's a little bit difficult for people to attend and be there concentrated for a lot of time. But this is also a cultural aspect, because for the Mediterraneans, I think it's more difficult to stay and discuss focused or to keep on, you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes on that. But in most of the cases, if the plan takes into account this cultural, let's say, dimensions, everything works smoothly. Then we have some urban design methodologies like tactical urbanism, which is a co-creation of small-scale intervention in the city, co-designed by the community, and it uses physical gathering or again some digital tools in order to be implemented. And this was the final, yes. So I will stop here, and then we will go a little bit deeper into how some tools and how exactly these methods are realized. Thank you.
This is the final presentation of this session with the methodological sources and the methodological way of thinking. And it's really, I'm really happy that I will somehow wrap all the previous very, very interesting presentations into one, because it's like when we talk about these mixed methods, it's not something, it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's like bringing together all the rich and important information that we've heard before. So crucial, the mixed methods and all these kind of bringing together different approaches is really crucial to integrated planning. And that could be our main topic of this presentation, to demonstrate how we can utilize different approaches. And we've seen all these approaches in detail before, and I will try to not dive into each approach separately, because that could be repetitiveness, but I will try to, in a strategic level, in an integrated approach, to combine them together and present to you different ways of how we can employ different aspects of planning, and to create an integrated planning methods, and to deliver the most integrated and the most sustainable result. So we have heard about qualitative and quantitative methods and data, and all the way that we have to process them and to conclude into results. But I think that this kind of dilemma is not, again, a binary dilemma that we have to face. It's something that it may be useful, and it may be helpful for going beyond that, beyond that kind of difference, beyond qualitative methods like focus groups, like interviews and participatory workshops, and quantitative, like all these spatial analysis that we've seen, and it was demonstrated very clearly from Ioana, and the ones that I've demonstrated before with connectivity and proximity planning. We have to embark into a mixed method approach, so we have to go beyond these two only approaches. And what we really need is the combination of that. So we have the qualitative research and then the quantitative, or vice versa, and the combination of them is the one that is called mixed methods research. So it's not something brand new, it's something of differentiating the way that we work. That's the key point when we deal with a mixed method approach. It's like taking different methods from qualitative and quantitative approaches, and we combine them accordingly together. And the main difference is, I'm underlining that, is the way we work. So integrated planning needs integrated methods. And that's something that we have in InPlaLabs as the pillar, or as the foundation of our network and our way of thinking. Is like when we talk about integrated planning, it's not only integrated disciplines. It's about integrating different methods like this one, the mixed method, and also about integrated roles. For example, we have practitioners, we have decision makers, we have academics, we have also students. So integrated, and the integrated thinking is something very, very comprehensive and something holistic. So integrated planning definitely needs integrated methods, and that's why we can take qualitative and quantitative and bring something new into play. So from social science studies, when we deal, and of course, okay, it's more common in social science studies, but we can find it in others, but I will stick on to the first. We have this methodological choice, this question. We question ourselves, and we're like, okay, what should I do right now? I want an integrated planning, or do I want a monofactional planning? So this is a flow. This is like a flow diagram of our thought, of our way of thinking, and this structures our thoughts accordingly. And if we have one method, we can choose between a quantitative and qualitative study. But if we want to achieve multiple methods, we can dive into two choices. The first one is a multi-method that we can use multiple methods of quantitative approaches or multiple methods of qualitative ones. But on the other hand, we have the mixed methods. The mixed methods could be simple or complex, but the main point is that we deal with those two main approaches together. So we can see this flow when we are thinking of how to deal with a problem. And this kind of diagram here is more detailed. So we can have mixed methods into different kinds of sequence. So it's not about having mixed method and it is one and universal way of thinking. It's about having mixed methods. So this is our first choice of getting into that pathway. But then we have to also think as a second step what we really need to do with that method. So we can have this convergent parallel design when we have in parallel, we work together with different kinds of data, and then we can compare them or relate them and interpret them accordingly. So this is one step for thinking. Another one is if we try to seek an explanation of something. So we have this explanatory sequential design. So we start from the quantitative data collection, and then we complement that with the qualitative. So it's like a quantitative first, it is followed up with a qualitative, and then we interpret that. So this could be a second pathway, and the third one could be, this would be the explanation, and the third one would be the exploration. Is if we want to explore something deeper, we have to firstly dig into qualitatively. So we can do some interviews, we can do some focus groups, and then we acquire a more detailed and more thorough view of our topic, and then we try to measure that. So I used the mixed methods approach for exploring something and interpreting that afterwards. So this is a very basic way of thinking, and we should really incorporate that into the integrated planning method. It's not something new. It's not something that we, as I said before, we invented for our integrated planning course, but it's something that we should borrow and we should really consider when we plan. And I have to make a comment here that planning is not only inventing things. It's about giving another meaning or employing or in thinking of existing tools, because sometimes existing tools could be valuable. And another objective or another aspiration could be solved or could be addressed through existing tools, and not with sticking to inventing something from scratch. So incorporating existing ways of thinking is really, really important. So that's why we bring that into the table, and we can see these three ways of thinking when we talk about mixed methods. Hence, we wanted to delineate some ways of thinking based on what I described before. And these kinds of strands thinking are really easy to explain and could be very helpful for anyone that wants to get into the integrated planning. So one kind of example would be to have firstly the qualitative methods and participatory workshops, or some in-depth qualitative techniques like in-depth interviews that could give us insights about strategies, about the vision, or about scenarios. So the scenarios are not from top. They're not top-down, but they are bottom-up approach. It's like we discuss with people. We've seen that from Phrixus and Dionysia, the way of engaging people, or the way of really qualitatively obtaining their insights and thoroughly, so we can form a basis for our planning, and then we can implement that through these quantitative tools that Ioanna described, and to measure accessibility, to measure all these kinds of scenarios or criteria that the participants or the experts could have indicated. So this is one way of thinking. Another one is something different, is that we can have some alternatives from, let's say, the formal planning. So we can have, for example, a 15 minutes neighborhood initiative from the municipality of city A or city B, and then we can take that, we can enrich that. For example, okay, we can take some routes, we can take some new land uses, and then we can enrich them, or we can spatially represent and visualize them, and give a representation of their geographical meaning. But we may want to evaluate that. We may want to see if this is something proper to get into, or we can evaluate which planning alternative is more concrete, or is more attained to our priorities, or to the community. So when we talk about community, the best thing to do is to really engage the community. So we can use firstly quantitative and then qualitative techniques to evaluate these alternatives. This is strand 2 of thinking. And strand 3 is the complete mixed methods, and we think that this is the proper way of integrated planning. But it's not the only correct one. This is the best way. There are 2 strands that I've described before. They are flexible enough, and they could be also used to our planning initiatives and schemes. But the strand 3 is really important, because it completes the whole notion of integrated planning. So we have the strategic vision, we have the scenarios, and we have the participation at first. These participants could provide us with the meaning, provide us with their priorities, provide us with what the community, if they represent the community, of course, what the community wants. So based on that, we can implement then the scenarios. But the process is not stopping there. The process continues. The process continues to re-engage people, to re-engage the qualitative aspect. And this kind of flow is really important when we want a holistic example of integrated planning. So we have this the flow, and also it's something important is like that the third part of evaluation could be complemented if we want with both quantitative techniques. So this is a strand. We can think of a strand 4 that we have 3A, which is qualitative, or 3B, which is quantitative. Therefore, when we talk about mixed methods, is about mixing qualitative and quantitative into different kinds of sequences. It's not one sequences and for all. It's about thinking of what sequence we want or what tools we're gonna employ. So here you can see an example. It's from a paper that deals with somehow water engineering and stuff like that. It's not about urban planning, but I wanted to show it to you because it's really helpful for the way of thinking. And we have strand 1. It's phase 1. We collect the data. Phase 2, we observe the participants. And phase 3, we also have an expert survey. So we have quantitative, qualitative into A, and qualitative and quantitative both in phase 3, but we can also have another strand stemming from phase 1 with quantitative. So we continue on the quantitative strand, and then we integrate these kind of two methods that we followed into a very holistic example. Another interesting opportunity and example is about the action planning cycle. This is from the AIRBACT, this founding scheme. So we can see that they think of planning as a cycle, as something that is that's not linear, but it's a cycle. So we cannot have a certain point of beginning and a certain point of ending. We can begin and end into different moments and points. So we can see, but we have to see that mapping stakeholders is really important, defining the problems, defining the actions, and also generating ideas and policy measures. So all these moments or points from this circle could be addressed through qualitative or quantitative techniques. That's very, very significant, because we are not limited when we deal with mixed methods. Mixed methods is about dealing in flexibility and dealing with carefully with our data, and we are able to give our data a meaning through how we can measure them and how we can process them. So if we take an example to wrap all these kinds of ways of thinking that I described a couple of minutes ago, we can see that we can take city Y, and we want to build a strategic vision for 2025. We can have a focus group to build the scenarios. We can have a participatory workshop for choosing the best scenario. So here you see all these kinds of tools that we heard before. Then we can plan this scenario, this selected scenario. So we can use firstly the connectivity for planning the neighborhoods, to connect the neighborhoods together. But for that, we can employ the accessibility analysis and the space index analysis tools. And then with these kinds of tools, all these conceptual connectivity issues comes into actual planning. So we have these GIS and the spatial analysis tools that can help us plan our scenarios, and then stepping into the final stage, we have the evaluation. The evaluation could firstly conduct a focus group for identifying the impacts of our scenario and of our planning. and then we can measure. So here we see the qualitative aspect and the quantitative aspect together. We can measure the spatial indicators for measuring, for identifying into an evidence-based way our impact. So all this kind of flow is really important when we deal with mixed methods. Otherwise, if we only did one out of these two, we will have, for example, very, very, very thorough qualitative insights. But what we really miss is the measurements of things that are not only qualitative. There are things that could be measured by numbers. Or on the contrary, if we only rely on numbers, we may forget about people, we may forget about feelings, we may forget about anything that cannot be measured by 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So when we talk about mixed methods, is something that Dionysia mentioned, and I really like that, is about choosing our methods wisely, is about choosing our methods based on what we want to do or what we have as a priority as a community or as a neighborhood or as a city or as a country or as a union of countries and stuff like that. So we have these diverse availability of tools, and these may be either qualitative or either quantitative, but then we take the objective, and the objective helps us, the objective or the objectives depends on what we have, and then we take that, it helps us, and it helps us to select our tools and methods, and all these kind of process gives us an integrated way of thinking and a proper way of combining aspects from qualitative and quantitative approaches. So that would be all. Again, thank you so much.